before I want to beat my gums about that. Yeah, my name's Adam Cook. I work for a managed service provider called IHG, and I'm one of the monkeys there that I just primarily do config manager. First off, thanks to the guys for doing today and letting me stand here and show what I've made. Thank you very much. The main driver for this it's like a personal goal for me to make something and give it to people and make it useful. So I feel like that I've really ticked a box with this, so I'm just gonna spend a bit of time telling you what it is, a quick demo of it. I won't go on too much. More importantly, I just want to get it out there because I think it could be really helpful. I'll just tell you what it is because that will help. It's a PowerShell script that will tell you what folders are not used and are used by Configuration Manager. And it's primarily used for reporting. It does not make any changes. There are no switches or parameters that will do any deleting, any moving. It's purely for reporting. So if you're worried about that, don't be. But anyway, I'm going to do a demo in a moment, but I'll quickly tell you how you can get hold of it. It's on GitHub, and it's also in the PS gallery. And the good thing about it being on the PS gallery, right, is that you, at least in PowerShell 5.1 onwards or 5 onwards, whatever, you can use install script, or at least find script, and its name is Get-CMUnusedSources, right? Just get it up in here as well. Maybe some of you aren't familiar with GitHub on how to pull something from there. You don't necessarily have to pull the whole repository, you can just grab the file. I keep the documentation on GitHub, so if you scroll down, default view is the README, and I've put a bit of time in to explain how to use it. So hopefully everything's there. I mean, it makes sense to me. If there's something that doesn't make sense, ping me on Twitter. I can work it. If you just click raw after you click the link, that's the best way to grab the content, otherwise you'll end up with squirrely characters, right? And then just save that. But let me take a step back. So how to use it. You can run it from your desktop. A good thing about this is that you don't have to run it on your primary site. You can run it remotely from a site server. And the good thing about it as well is that it's perfectly fine multi-site. There's a switch in there where you can specify which site code. So it will go out and find out all packages under a site code. But I feel like it might just be better if I showed you how it works. So that was where I had it open previously. So the benefit of being on PS Gallery is that I showed you but flicked away earlier, is you can pull stuff from the PS Gallery and search for stuff, and the simple command of install script, right? And the same again, Get-CMUnusedSources will put it in typically your documents, Windows PowerShell scripts directory. You'll probably get a prompt, right, saying you don't have a scripts directory and it's an untrusted repository if it's the first time you've used that commandlet. But as soon as you run the install script or you pull it from GitHub, save it wherever you like, it will be there. So it's very simple to get started with it, right? I recommend calling it into a variable because the default returns as an array is a long list of PS objects, which is just 2 properties, a folder name, and whether it's used or not. If it's used by anything, it will tell you, and if it's not, it will just simply say not used. So you need to give it a path of where you keep your sources. I actually started on this in February, and I was finished within a month. I was like, yeah, great. And I spoke to some guys who work with Config Manager, and they said, oh, but we store all our sources on a central file server, so then I had to rework it, and it's totally fine if you want to pass it a local path or a UNC path. You don't have to worry about the path length. There's some a couple of lines in there that uses a syntax of, so if you use a convention of that avoids the default max path limit of 260 characters, and it becomes 35,000. So don't worry if you've got really big content repository, it'll work around that, all right? So for me, in this environment, this is a lab back home. I'm just going to do a real quick demo. I'm going to point it to where I keep just applications. When I say applications, I mean strictly the app model applications, not including packages, because if I did that, I have like many objects, and it'll take too long. My site code, and it's my initials, and then the site server, give it the FQDN, right? Or NetBIOS. You can do a HTML report. It uses a PS module called PS-Write HTML, and it has some functions in there where you can then pump out to XLS, CSV, PDF. So that's why I have included those switches, because that module is awesome. It does it all for you. So give it the HTML report if you want to give something to management or whatever. Running default, right? Okay. Running default like that will go get all content objects. When I say content object, I mean your packages, your applications, your drivers, your driver packages, your boot images, everything. That's a content object to me. And because I'm only pointing at a source location for applications, I'm only going to filter on applications. He says. Tell you what. Yeah? Say again? It's not also completing the parameters, so I wonder why. Oh, I know why. Because I'm not in where I want to be. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'll flick through. You can see I can filter just to go gather the packages, applications, drivers, driver packages, OS images, so on. But I'm only interested in doing applications, HTML report, right? You'll see straight away there that there's access denied on a particular folder, on a folder called permission denied. That was just for testing. Don't worry about that, because it does report on things like that, and it takes it into consideration. And the general overview is, if I try and explain to you how it works, then maybe it'll give you some confidence, because ultimately this will give you insight into making maybe a dangerous decision like deleting. So if I give you a bit of an overview of how it works, hopefully that'll help. So the first thing it does is it goes and gets all the folders underneath the source folder parameter that you gave it, right? So in that example, I have 64 folders, and it's gathering content objects application, because I passed the parameter applications. If I omitted that, it will go get them all. In here, I have like only 132 content objects, so that's everything like package applications and drivers, so on. Once it's got those loaded into memory, into a variable, it's pretty cool, right? Because I think it's pretty cool anyway, at least. It has multi-threading. So it queues jobs, and the idea is that for every folder, loop through all content objects. And you're probably sat there thinking, Jesus Christ, that is slow. Why are you doing that? That's so inefficient. Don't blame you. But it's probably the most effective way to be able to try and determine if a folder is or is not used. Once it works out whether a folder is used, it then does various things like calculating how much of those folders classed as not used are, how much disk space it occupies. And because I specified the HTML report, it creates the HTML report in the same directory it's called from. So if I long list here. You'll see a HTML file. So the reason why I said put it into a variable called result, okay? So if I select the first 10 objects, first 10 items in here, okay, you'll see what I mean now by these two properties, a folder name and its status, whether it's an intermediate folder, not used, and the exact object name or ID, actually no, just the name, what it's used by. An intermediate folder, as self-explanatory, is a sub or a parent folder, right? So imagine that you ran this at the root of your sources, so I don't know, you have a SECM-F, for example, right? Maybe I did the whole F drive, and maybe you have the same, or maybe you store it on a file server, right? That result object will be huge for you, thousands, right? So maybe you just want to care about the ones that have a status of not used. Which is great. But maybe the meat and potatoes for you is in the report. In this example here, bearing in mind this is just the view of the applications in this demo that I've done.
Can I just ask a quick question? Sorry.
Yeah.
On that one, can you add in the date or a date variable into the column then export to CSV? So you can, I use Windows Start or tree size. But then
a date, did you say?
Could I add the date onto that? So I could add the date as a value, as a variable. So when you run your report,
Where would you want the date, sorry?
Well, when you run your report on your PowerShell script, you've got the, all right, cool. But could it give me the date on the data source, on the data report that you get there?
So what, visually, like a header?
Well, add it as a column, so every file folder has a date attached to it. Could I add that as a variable on your script?
When you're recursing through those folders and files, just pull out the date created date profile and append it as an addition.
Or last access, because sometimes you create a file, it was last accessed, it was last modified, so there's 3 values. So at the moment, I have a problem with one client where I am right now, that we're basically run out of site server storage. So if I can add the date on your script for those, it was created, it was last modified, it was last accessed, and then we can do some housekeeping to get the... Do you see where I'm going with it?
I do, yeah. I just don't think if the last modified or last access would be of much help.
It would be in our circumstance because we've basically filled one server.
Say again, sorry?
We've basically, one department's running out of space on an old server.
So how would last write access help?
Yeah, well, because we can then, if it was last created, if it's created 10 years ago, it was last accessed 5 years ago, then...
Yeah, okay. No, I see the value in that, but I think that you might have even better value, maybe in all not used folders, in this tab up top. And you know how I was just kind of maybe poorly demonstrating here in zoom it. Does that help? So when I was filtering on the property by not used, okay, this is a list of all folders that are not used. Maybe that might just, I mean, because technically, right, if there was a folder that was last accessed 10 years ago, it could still be used. Unlikely, because no doubt config managers had a hand on it, right, throughout in the past 10 years.
So it's all unused items can be cleaned out, not some. And what you'd have to do is an educated guess, which this gentleman is trying to divine. He wants to atomize that a bit further by saying anything that's older than 5, just scrub it. And don't worry and think about less than 5. I can't see that being high value. but it's still something that could be done. And I was trying to think of where you would use that use case, and it would be a very narrow window, right up to today, where I might have dropped some stuff into the repository and I haven't linked it to SCCM. And when he does his grooming, all that would get washed away. I don't think that's high value because someone could just put it back on there. But it's work in progress that you might be pulling out. So if I had operation teams underneath me and I clean out to free the space, I use this and I target everything, not the first 10, and I zap the lot, then I've got operational teams that are going to raise echoes or complaints, or just going, where is that stuff, and put it back again. But it's just like, that whole disruption thing and minimizing the disruption. So I guess it kind of would be helpful to put a date in there, but you're the author and it's a suggestion.
No, that's a good suggestion. I mean, that certainly tickled some ideas, and I appreciate your need for it. But to answer your question, no. Currently, no. Can you append a last access time to a folder in the results? No. I mean, I can when I get home, no doubt, right? I mean, I spent, like 4 or 5 months writing this, and I kept saying to myself, yeah, we're done next week. And I kept saying to the missus, Miss, I'm almost done, we can start going out. Like, no, no. Miles away from that.
It's the life of a developer.
Oh, dodgy developer, really, honestly.
Got another question for you, another angle.
Hey.
The site code is redundant.
Redundant?
Absolutely. You're connecting to a server. There aren't 2 site codes on a server. If I was a CAS, it'd still be 1 site code.
I disagree. In my example, single site, 100% redundant. But if there's multiple primary sites and you only want to care about, in fact, you can only care about 1 site's packages, applications, drivers, that's how you filter it.
But you've missed the point. If I'm connecting to a server, I'm connecting to something that already exists and can only be singular. So, for example, I connect to a server. It's going to be ABC site code. What we do normally is we connect to the machine, WMI, the SMS provider, and we ask it, what's your site code? And I get it. So that I'm just saying that you could drop that property, because when I connect to that server, it's not going to give me a list of 10 site codes. Even if it's a CAS, I'd have to drill into other parts of WMI namespace to get that. But it'd be valuable because you're just dropping one more thing off the list.
No,
and it's not going to make a difference to what you're doing today. You can keep it in there.
No, that's a good point. I mean, there's no reason why I can't connect by WMI and query. No, cheers, yeah. To pick up a question that was asked, what defines not used? Great. So another parameter of the whole script is to export the results to XML, but also export all of your content objects. And that's what I've just done here. So if I get the first content object that was gathered, 6 properties: content type, package, unique ID, name, source path flag, and all paths. That's a bad example because there's a local path there. So let me choose one that's got like a UNC path, because that will really show like the brains behind this, right? There's another one with a local path. Let's choose something that's actually, yeah, that'll do. I want to find yeah, that'll do. Yeah, cool. So you can kind of see what's going on here, right? So source path, observe that. You've got net BIOS in the UNC path, you've got the share name, and you've got the remainder of the path to get to the location. And the all paths properties, you can probably see, is permutations of the source path. And if I expand that array, because there's trailing breadcrumbs in there at the end. Oh, yeah, because it's a hash table. What does hash table? Yeah, it's hash table. Anyway, do you know what? Yeah, I know. I kind of rocked up like, Billy Big Bollocks, like, yeah, I'll do a demo. Anyway, yes, right, so there's permutations of the source path. Let me get the original object back into view. And what that kind of enables you to do is, or enables it to do, is trying to determine from a content object source path if it's used. And you have to bear in mind, right, I walked into this environment that spawned this idea where there's been like 1 million admins who've touched it, and they all had their own sort of way of defining a source path for an object. So, 7-zip, 32-bit deployment type could use like, this syntax, with the FQDN and the dollar share, whereas the 64-bit, for some reason or not, doesn't. It uses the net BIOS and it uses the share name instead of the drive name. So what it does is that when it's looping through all content, when it's looping through all folders and then looping through all content objects, it's getting the source path of the content object, and it's asking, are you an exact match in all of these all paths? Or do you start with one or the other? And that's how we find out intermediate paths. So not used literally is, I have found absolutely no matches under the given source path. Maybe that makes sense.
Because we don't necessarily delete the source. We retire things and then undistribute it. So it stays on the master server, but it's not on the distribution point. So I was hoping there would be a test for is it retired, and then your list of retired ones. That would make a big difference. Code branch.
No, yeah, I don't produce any sort of property that flags it whether it's tired.
Just repeat that one for us, Adam, just for the
Yeah,
audio.
the question was, I don't know your name. Mark. Mike. Mike's process is that he retires and removes content from DPs, and then he wants to know if what's produced here has a flag of, is it retired or not? Is that right? Yeah, there's no sort of reporting on that.
Food for thought. It could all be extended, I guess, to whatever you want it to be. It's a nice base.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so I work for a managed service provider, and we have a contract for many config manager environments. And I got thrown in, and I took one look at the drive because it's local, and I thought, I don't know where anything is. Drivers are in packages, and applications are in packages folders, and it was a mess. So yeah, I came up with this because I poked around on Twitter. I was like, what do people do in this situation? They were like, set standards, chip away. I was like, no, I ain't doing that. There's 8,000 content objects, So unfortunately, this took quite a bit of time. 5 months pretty much of my time, but I learned a lot on the way, and I'm no means a guru, right? Because a lot of praise has to go out to the guys in the Windows admin Slack. They taught me a bunch. And it's kind of spawned a love in PowerShell to the extent where it's kind of making me think, do I want to move to like infrastructure as code type thing? Because as PowerShell is growing, it's becoming incredible with the stuff going on with Linux and all the commandlets and the modules that are becoming available. And the greatest gold is in the community, right? All the community-driven modules. So yeah, it's driven in love. Yeah.
GitHub, you can do a pull request.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to.
Get stuck in, mate.
It's not just about Adam changing this. If you guys have got some great ideas, then do a pull request. Change it, yeah, fork it, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Good luck reading it, because it's quite a number of lines. It peaked about 1,500 lines.
All fully commented, of course.
Oh, half of it is comments. To be fair, yeah, half of it is comments. So.
At least it's not all on one line.
No, and
Nice.
you know what? Someone mentioned, I think Ben mentioned earlier about Cody, right? And he's a great guy, and he codes well, and he was an inspiration for styling of coding, and that's something, I'm not a developer, but I've kind of started thinking like one sometimes with simple things like formatting, like shorthand stuff with PowerShell with the aliases. I hate that, especially when written scripts, right? So yeah, I mean, he was an example because he writes well, and then you say that if you're going to write something to publish it, do it well. And like I said at the start, this was something that was like a career goal for me, to write something that will be used by people that they'll get the benefit from. But I'm under no illusion, right? You'll run this once in a blue moon because it's not something you'll run every week. It's not. You'll run it once and you'll never run it again, likelihood. Because if you like... Yeah.
Of these tools, like my tools, sorry to hijack, my tools were written because I go in to do work brief spells. I haven't got time to sit around. So I want to have a look at the inboxes quickly, so I had a visual tool for that. I've written a spattering of tools. And it comes from that idea that I'm going somewhere. I haven't got the time to sit around and clean that and do house cleaning and the kind of stuff you do if you're bum on a seat permanently.
Right.
So I'm going in,
You're
I've got a huge mountain, I've got to cover that ground quick. So I write tools to get my job done, and then I throw them out in the community. One thing I will say is don't expect the community to come back and say anything about it. You just see an increase in download counts. No one will really say anything.
Yeah.
But you will go to a company and you'll sit down and there's your tool. And that's the biggest value that I got, the biggest swell of my heart was when I saw my tools. Or other people saying, I use your tools. It's just a real, that's what I think you're seeking.
That's what got me going, and that's what drove me a lot of the time. So I relate to that 100%.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Say again?
Codamark.
Coda-amok, yeah, it's an anagram.
CODAAMOK.
Yeah, yeah. Hey?
I've just tweeted it from the WMUG Twitter as well. If anyone follows it.
Nice. I mean, I was a bit naive approaching this because I didn't really have a solid plan on what I was going to say. Yeah. I knew it was going to be long, but 5 months was long. But I mean, the problem was I didn't set a goal early on what I wanted it to look like, and that was the problem because I kept coming up with ideas. Oh, maybe if I had that. Oh, I could do that better. Oh, I've just learnt this. Let's do that. You know, it just turned into like a back and forth a lot of the time. But yeah, you're not wrong there. Yeah.
I spent 9 months writing a product in C#.
Did you not?
My wife wouldn't say it's that.
No.
I truly just
Yeah. I can relate to everything you say. Yeah. Totally. No, totally. Oh, no, that's very kind of you to say. Yeah, definitely. I think chocolate tea's for binaries, right? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. No, I haven't gone into everything in detail because, like I say, I kind of approached it a bit naively. I haven't done everything, but please give it a go. Ping me if there's any issues. Loads of people tested it I posted it on Reddit and Twitter, and I saw the downloads creep and got some positive feedback. There was no issues. The one thing I'll say is the runtime is long because the efficiency is poor with the idea of it for every folder loop for every content object. To give you a bit of insight, one customer environment is like 40,000 folders and 8,000 content objects with 8 threads, because there is a parameter for threads. It took, I think, like 4.5 hours. So it'll take a little while. Yeah, definitely. Hey?
Still faster than that DNA.
Yeah. But look, I mean, I haven't done a great job of explaining it, but please give it a go and let me know what you think. Yeah, it's a bit of a personal touch, really. I mean, a lot of that is mostly driven for like a personal sort of an account, if you like.
We'll share a link to that as well through Twitter, through WMUG.
Nice one.
Yeah, we'll like it.
I'll stop beating my guns. We all want to go home, don't we?
It's beer o'clock.
It's beer o'clock. Right, cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam.